The federal government is going to pause the expansion of medical-assisted dying until 2027. Health Minister Mark Holland says provinces and healthcare systems they run need more time to prepare.
We want to make sure is that the system is trained to that standard, that the curriculums are adopted, and what I specifically heard from my health counterparts in provinces and territories is in order to get to that state, they were going to need a significant amount of time.
All right, some senators who have long advocated for MAID to be extended to include those suffering solely from mental illness are calling this delay unfair.
The government itself said yes to an option for MAID for those where mental illness is the sole underlying condition. So they created hope for people, and I believe now have dashed it.
So, Andrew, this has been delayed a couple of times now. This will push it beyond the next election. The next parliament will deal with this. But we've heard from senators and other advocates saying this is probably a charter violation and to expect maybe a legal challenge or maybe do a reference case to get some clarity on how to proceed. Where do you think this is right now?
That where there are constitutional questions, reference cases are good. But this is more than that. I think this is really kind of staring the healthcare system and the social service systems in the face and asking what is happening in this situation that we have people who are suffering from mental illness, who are moving to a point of such despair that they are no longer feeling not only can they not manage their illness, but they can't manage to continue to live, and that they need this, this other option. This is very different than where we started out with MAID. I think for a lot of us, there is a conflict, because if we believe that these kind of decisions that a person is autonomous, they should have a general right to make decisions about their health care and their end-of-life decisions, then there's a certain question about, again, why is government preventing that from happening?
Right.
But on the same point, I mean, my hope is that if the government is going to take a couple of years on this, that they do a heck of a lot more than what Mark Holland has suggested, which is talking about how to get the system ready for it. I hope they actually talk about what kind of supports need to be put in place to help people manage this, what kind of supports need to take away that desperation that people are feeling like this is, living with a mental illness should not immediately lead to the idea that the only outcome is an imminent death. And that's the piece that I think as Canadians we've got to figure out how to get into that discussion with. Again, lots of complicated issues in this, some constitutional, some moral, but a lot of it is also about a healthcare system and social service system that's just not working.
James, by pushing it off to after the next election, it potentially makes it an issue for the election. Where do you think that potentially goes?
It's hard to imagine, because this is such a complicated issue. I mean, when you have courts effectively finding a right, and this goes back to Sue Rodriguez in the 80s and 90s rather. So I mean, this has been going on for decades. It probably will be going on for decades more, as the courts found a right. The federal legislature, Parliament, had a hard time trying to find the right legislative solution. It was found to be unconstitutional under this Liberal government, but it's through no, I think, bad faith on behalf of Jody Wilson-Raybould at the time, the minister, and other attorneys general who have wrestled with this. And then you have provinces who have to regulate and administer it. And all the while, you have the public standing around watching all this happen, and with shifting views and real anxiety about a court-found law that's difficult to legislate and regulate, that is found now to be pretty often and far too frequently abused in a way that creates real discomfort, I think, by a lot of Canadians about how many people are dying within our healthcare system. And then opens up the other side, as Andrew just outlined, about the importance of mental health and how we approach this. So, pushing it past the next election, fine. The issue is not going to go away. It's been here for decades. It'll be here for decades more. It'll likely be led not by the government, not by any politician. It'll likely, frankly, won't be led by public opinion, but the courts will continue to push back and force this down the road. But,
Carleen, pushing it past the next election, I mean, obviously there are consequences for going too fast with something like this, but a lot of advocates will say there's consequences for going too slow, that people who want to end their suffering continue to suffer.
One of the perhaps silver linings of the complexity of an issue like medical assistance in dying is that you notice political parties are hesitant to wade into it and summarize in one slogan or one line what they believe is going right or isn't going right about the policy. I think one thing that we've seen so far, without a doubt, is that thus far, since it was initially legalized in 2016, the policy has been a success in that it has afforded dignity to thousands of people. It has relieved suffering. But what we saw today essentially was government working as it should. There was an intended date by which the next expansion of the policy was set to happen. They heard from provinces and territories and other stakeholders that we needed to pump the brakes a bit, so they said, okay, we're going to do that. Same time, and it's been noted by others, you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So at the same time as we are figuring out how to implement such a complex and fraught piece into the medical care system, we also have to be able to be addressing those root causes of mental health issues at the same time.
Yeah, don't waste the time, Shachi.
Exactly.
Yeah, use the time to come up with something that can work and the Canadians will accept. Just final word to you.
Well, we see so much of the worst of Canadian politics. It would be absolute horrible folly to see this issue become politicized. As the others have said, this is profoundly sensitive. This really underpins a couple of things. It is really about the state of access to mental health treatment. When we asked Canadians about this in September of last year, we took time to talk to Canadians who were willing and trusted us to tell us that, hey, they had actually sought treatment for mental health care. And what we found was really quite stunning. Among Canadians who say they've sought mental health treatment in this country in the last little while, those that were able to access it in turn told us that the treatment worked, that they were feeling better, or, did it work entirely, but they're feeling better than they did before. For those who couldn't access it, that is where you see the split and that sense of desperation or hopelessness when you can't access mental health care in this country. The data shows you're far more likely to support mental illness as sole condition for MAID. When you have been able to access care for mental health treatment and you've had some alleviation of your symptoms and alleviation of your suffering, you're far less likely to support it. James said earlier about how public opinion wouldn't be something that drives this. That may be the case. It's probably true. What it does, however, is it provides some cover for government to take more time on this issue, despite what the advocates on some sides say, because in the case of the Conservative base, the Liberal base, more people are opposed to mental health as a sole condition than are not. You see a split within the bases of the NDP, and among Bloc voters, again, people are leaning more towards not supporting it. So there is political cover there. There's also, I think, really important to point out the difference that we've seen in public opinion on this issue from going back to 2016, when the conditions were about imminent death and alleviation of suffering, and we've seen watching loved ones or people we know have dignified deaths, whether it was a cancer diagnosis or something else, when they had mere weeks to go and be able to choose the time of their exit. This is a completely different thing that I think many Canadians, and we see it in the data, feel that hasn't been fully explored, and they have a lot of questions about and a lot of discomfort around.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. We're out of time, but I want to thank you all for dealing with a couple of heavy topics. Shachi Curl, James Moore, Andrew Thompson, and Carleen Varayan.